Ideal mesmo para o mundo atual seria fazer o ensino médio junto com o curso técnico, certo? É no Senac que o aluno tem autonomia de verdade, formação cidadã, foco na diversidade, preparação para o Enem, material didático sem taxas e muito mais. Na real, tem tudo que você precisa para se sentir preparado para a vida. Seja para entrar no mundo do trabalho ou te ajudar a decidir o que fazer na faculdade. Quer saber? Senac. Vem comigo! Acesse sp.senac.br/ensino-médio-técnico.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It's Eric Erickson here across the United States of America. The phone number is 877-973-7425 should you wish to be on the program. I got to play you this audio. I found it very funny. Caitlin Collins at CNN sat down with Nathan Wade, Fani Willis's boyfriend, and begins to ask him questions about the relationship. And what you're going to hear is that Nathan Wade's lawyer feels the need to interrupt, and they end the interview.
Just to clarify, when did the romantic relationship between the two of you start?
Yeah, so, we get into, there's been this effort to say that, okay, these exact dates are at issue, and these exact dates are, I'm getting signaled here.
Yeah, take it. Can I go off the mic for a second?
Yes.
Okay. Go off the mic. Keep rolling? Yeah, keep rolling. Don't stop now. Stay at speed.
Have this crosstalk going on in the background. There goes microphones. More talking in the background. Remember, it was when did this romantic relationship begin? That was the question. Got to have the lawyer in the room with him.
Everything okay?
Yeah.
Just to revisit the question, it was to clarify when the romantic relationship started and when it ended.
Sure. So, I believe that the public has, through the testimony and other interviews, the public has a clear snapshot that this is clearly just a distraction.
You just got really distracted in the interview, Nathan. Oh, so they gotta have a consistency. Got to have the lawyers in the room with him to ensure that his story stays consistent. That's not really reassuring. This whole case has been brought down under the weight of Fani Willis's ego and his. And the Democrats now, they can call Donald Trump until an appeal throws it out. They can call him a convicted felon on the campaign trail because anything that happens, the appellate process isn't going to work its way through before the election. So they can call Trump a convicted felon, and they're not lying. He is, whether we think it's a legitimate verdict or not. The technicality of it is. But they really wanted all these other cases to go forward, too. Because the Democrats have known all along that the Alvin Bragg case was a weak case, too, with the judge who gave money against Donald Trump, the propriety of it. I mean, they're trying to attack Sam Alito for flying an appeal to heaven flag, and his wife having a flag, an American flag upside down. CNN keeps trotting out the former neighbor who's an actress who admits she's a progressive partisan who called Sam Alito's wife the C word, and that she's somehow some objective truth teller on television with no axe to grind against the Alitos. They're trying to discredit that, and yet they don't want us to discredit the verdict in New York that's so easily discredited just by pointing out the judge is a Joe Biden donor who gave money to stop Donald Trump to a fund that was called Stop Donald Trump and His Right-Wing Legacy. So they really wanted the Jack Smith cases and the Fani Willis cases to go to trial. And it's not going to happen. And in fact, the Fani Willis case is collapsing. It's on hold now while Court of Appeals judges determine whether or not she should be disqualified from the case. The Jack Smith cases are being dragged out. The Supreme Court should any day now rule on the immunity issue. There's been a lot of speculation. So the court had they had decisions today, probably not tomorrow. They will have several next week. Any day now, in the next week or two, this case is going to be decided by the Supreme Court on Donald Trump's immunity, and I really will be shocked if they determine he has immunity. I do not believe the Supreme Court is going to give Donald Trump a win. It's part of what roughing up Sam Alito is about these cases. I don't think it matters whether Sam Alito decides or not. I don't think a majority of the Supreme Court is going to side with Donald Trump on that. It'd be absurd if they did, frankly. Now, those of you who aren't lawyers, you can yell at me and say, we're going to give you protection. No. You don't want the president of the United States to have absolute immunity for the things he does in office. You don't want any president to do it. You don't want Joe Biden to have absolute immunity from the things he does in office. You do not want a president of the United States to be able to think he can send SEAL Team 6 to assassinate his rival. Yet here we are arguing these absurdist positions. It is absurd. But so is the prosecution of Donald Trump in a lot of these cases. You know, it's real funny to hear Democrats now worrying about Republicans' reciprocation. This is Chris Murphy, partisan Democrat from Connecticut.
Hunter Biden was convicted of federal gun charges this week. And some Republicans have had interesting responses to that, particularly ones who would criticize the justice system as biased beforehand. But there was one that I just saw on Twitter like seconds ago as I was coming out to do this interview from your colleague, Senator Ted Cruz, who wrote, the Biden White House wanted Hunter Biden to be found guilty on the gun charges since they are the only ones that do not implicate Joe Biden. I just want your reaction to Senator Cruz.
I mean, I generally don't respond to Ted Cruz, who, really is only looking to get clicks online and drive donations to his webpage. The reality is that Republicans' sort of brazen decision to endorse the justice system's decision-making when it convicts a Democrat, like the president's son, and decision to call the system rigged when it convicts a Republican, like the former president, is a real worrying advertisement from Republicans that they are planning to potentially use the justice system as a mechanism to target Trump's political opponents. Listen, I accept the jury's decision with respect to Hunter Biden. I accept the jury's decision as it is respected to Donald Trump, but Republicans seem to only believe the justice system is working right when it convicts Democrats and believe that it's illegitimate when it convicts Republicans. And that to me is a signal that they may be very open to using the justice system as a political tool to persecute opponents if they get power again.
Okay. I want to say something to all of you. I know the talking point for the Republicans is that the Democrats are fine with this Hunter Biden conviction because it distracts from all the Hunter Biden, Joe Biden ties, and so they were fine he was found guilty of this. That's such a stupid line of remark. It's for gullible people, and if you believe it, you are a dumb person. I need you to know that, yes, I am insulting you. If you really do believe this whole thing, that actually the Democrats wanted Hunter Biden to be found guilty of this to distract from all the ties to Joe Biden, you need to look in the mirror and say you are the person who is the low information, gullible voter. It's a stupid talking point that Republicans came up with. And what it's actually designed to do is not for you to believe it, although some of you will. It's actually for us to cast aspersions on, hey, look, they're still not prosecuting for the Joe Biden stuff. That's the actual point of the talking point. The point of the talking point is not to be believable, though sadly there will be some idiots who believe it. It's to say, hey, we've still got all of these nefarious ties that the Democrats have weaponized the Justice Department to cover up, and those are about Joe Biden's business dealings with his family. Even the Politico runs stories on how Joe Biden himself may not be directly advising his brother and his son on their business deals, but is allowing his aides to be used in that process. That's the whole point of it. And I do wish that Republicans had phrased it better so that a bunch of gullible people don't go out there and say, they wanted Hunter Biden to be found guilty. Joe Biden wanted Hunter to go to jail. No, he doesn't. In fact, he's probably going to commute it. He's not going to pardon. The White House is even openly saying he might just commute the sentence. I personally think he's still going to pardon him, but even if he doesn't, he commutes it. It's Joe Biden's history of having his son escape the consequences of his actions. It's relevant that Joe Biden has questionable business dealings, and the Justice Department that claims it's not weaponized has failed to pursue them. This is a Justice Department that will not arrest the anti-Semitic protesters who are vandalizing public property, but will arrest the grandmother who's in a wheelchair because she prayed in an abortion clinic. This is the American Department of Justice that has decided to arrest a whistleblowing doctor in Texas who exposed his hospital going down the transgender road in violation of Texas law. And the Justice Department is going to prosecute him, not the hospital. Don't tell me that this Justice Department isn't weaponized. It's very funny. Merrick Garland comes out and writes an op-ed and says, I haven't weaponized the Justice Department. Everyone's like, well, you can't say they weaponized it. Merrick Garland denies it. Had Bill Barr come out and said the Justice Department wasn't weaponized, every single Democrat would be crying foul about it. The fact that the Democrats can write this stuff in a newspaper, we're all supposed to just nod our head and accept it as truth, is one of the reasons that so many people in this country on the right are so angry with how the left and the media together are stacked against us all. We are always forced to be on defense whenever they make up an accusation. They say the Supreme Court is somehow rigged. Well, we have to accept that it's rigged and prove them wrong. No, there's no evidence of it. But the media has decided to be on the left side. I wrote my column this morning and talked yesterday about the Troubles, the Northern Ireland Troubles, and how the Troubles are coming here, and the media has a lot to do with it. They'll never hold themselves accountable. You know, Oliver Darcy from CNN is calling venues that have decided to host Tucker Carlson. He's doing a road show. And Oliver Darcy is he's harassing the venues. He is harassing the venues, designed to gin up a mob against the venues. That's the entire purpose of his reporting. There's no other reason to call and ask these companies, how dare you, why would you host Tucker Carlson, other than to generate a mob against them. That's what he's doing. Activist journalism paid for by CNN against Tucker Carlson because they don't like Tucker Carlson. It's why so many Republicans hate the media, and why so many Republicans will one day, when bad things start happening to reporters, turn a blind eye to it and say, you got what you deserve, whether it's right or wrong. That's what's going to happen. It's so easily predictable. And the fact that the media will take Merrick Garland's assertion that there's been no weaponization of the Justice Department and take that over the actual facts of the weaponization of the Justice Department is remarkable. It's truly remarkable. And it's only getting worse. And as it gets worse, it is going to descend to violence. All right, I'm going to take a time out here because I got people on hold. I want to take these phone calls and don't want to leave them up short, so we will be back. The phone number 877-973-7425.
Tem momento na carreira que precisamos dar passo além. É hora de fazer uma pós-graduação. Só que muitas vezes o custo pesa no bolso, inviabilizando tudo. Com a pós-graduação do Senac, você não tem esse problema. Cursos com até 50% de desconto e muito mais tempo para pagar. TCC opcional, modelo flexível com aulas presenciais e online e alguns cursos com apenas 12 meses de duração. Não tem mais desculpa, hein? Saiba mais em sp.senac.br/pós-graduação.
Waiting patiently in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Bob's there on the phone. Welcome. How are you?
Hi, Eric. Hey, speaking of media incompetence at best or possibly malfeasance at worst, when I was a kid growing up in Idaho, I remember the Iran hostage crisis was on the news every day. It said how many days they were in captivity. U.S. citizens were in captivity. And then I remember during the Iraq War, we saw the photos of every one of our heroes who sadly were killed. They were on the TV. And the other day I was talking to my wife, and she pays some attention to the news, but she had no idea there are 6 U.S. citizens who were captured on October 7th, held by Hamas terrorists. Why is this not on TV every day? Why is it not on all the chyrons? Why is it not on every website banner? And is there not any doubt that President Trump would have already had those folks back?
You know, it's funny you say that. Being over here in Louisiana, my parents now live in my grandmother's house, and I remember when I was little, my grandmother had a yellow ribbon on her front porch when the hostages had been taken in Iran, and I remember when she took it down. I was not even yet in kindergarten and can remember that yellow ribbon. And you're right. Yeah, we've got these hostages, 250 days now, 250 days in captivity as of today. And the media, you would think, would want to put them on the front page and highlight it and ask what the president has done. But, I mean, this is the American media that gave Joe Biden a pass over Afghanistan despite leaving Americans behind there, which, by the way, there are still Americans stuck in Afghanistan trying to get out. And he's dragged his feet on that. Bob, it's such a great point. Thanks for that. It's infuriating. All right, Andrew, you're going to be next on the Eric Erickson Show. Andrew hung up right as I was going to his call. He hung up on me. Well, that's a shame. Okay, well, now let's see here. It's AJ. You're going to be up next. Welcome.
Hey, Eric, just wanted to ask you quick if you see any parity between the data with leading up to the Carter reelection attempt and the upcoming one we got, coming up.
Oh, okay. So I don't know, other than the fact that Joe Biden is actually more unpopular in the polling averages than Jimmy Carter was, which is actually striking. Joe Biden is less popular than Jimmy Carter was in 1980. But it actually it's kind of hard given the dynamics of then versus now and the changes in population, other than the fact that we have a more diverse population now. White voters are a smaller percentage of the population of voters out there, and yet despite all of that, Joe Biden is less popular than Jimmy Carter was running for re-election in 1980, and Carter lost. The other issue, though, is that it's so neck and neck now, and it really wasn't. It was kind of close in 1980, but Reagan pulled away at the end. If I remember right, now I obviously wasn't a voter at the time or old enough to really pay attention, but I do know my history, and it was the debate in 1980 that really won Reagan that election when he asked that question, and everybody in America was watching, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And his polling at the end began to widen against Carter, and it kept widening after that as people settled into that. The other issue, of course, is we didn't have the border situation than we have now that's really affecting polling. Americans for Prosperity Foundation's been taking people to the border to see it for themselves. So I talked to one of the guys who went down there, and he said it was actually really amazing because you hear about it on TV and you see the camera footage, but you yourself can go to the border and watch the steady wave of people coming across. He said, and what you don't understand is the litter, the ecological disaster, the bushes that have been trampled, the trash on the ground, that it's a mess. And Americans for Prosperity Foundation has been taking people down there to see it, and Americans for Prosperity has been reminding people about the common sense solutions that we could deploy to fix the problem at securebordersecureamerica.com. Securebordersecureamerica.com. It's a website set up by Americans for Prosperity that highlights how you have a border wall. There are parts of the border where it's almost physically impossible to get in to put a border wall, but there's technology we could use to supplement there. We have Border Patrol agents, increased funding for processing and housing and things like that, and they're common sense conservative solutions at securebordersecureamerica.com. If you go to securebordersecureamerica.com, you can find the solutions and also find how to advocate for those solutions thanks to Americans for Prosperity. Hello and welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States. The phone number is 877-973-7425. I oftentimes It's my own personal biases. I grew up overseas. I've spent a good portion of my formative years traveling overseas. So I tend to pay attention to foreign affairs more than most, in large part because I do think that there is a lack of, and I don't want it to, occasionally I intend to be insulting. I don't intend to be here. I don't mean to be, but I do think there is a myopicness sometimes in conservative conversations about our role in the world stage, and these things matter. And so I oftentimes, including this week, have started the show with foreign affairs because I do actually think these things matter greatly and they do affect us domestically. And Joe Biden is really botching it in the world. And if it were a Republican doing these things, the media would care. And that's one of my frustrations with the American press corps these days, including, I've got good friends at CNN, even if I disagree with them, but I email them these stories and say, you and I both know darn well, if this happened and a Republican were president, you would cover this, and you're not now because you're so scared of Donald Trump, you think you got to protect Joe Biden, and you're not painting an accurate picture of the world. And one of those is our deal with Saudi Arabia. 50 years ago, the United States entered an agreement with Saudi Arabia that every oil transaction conducted by the Saudis would be conducted in the American dollar. And it was a great exchange rate. The American dollar being the world's trading currency, putting everything in the American dollar did a couple of things. One, it reduced our business transactions in the world. Two, it made it cheaper for us to buy oil. Three, it allowed us to track transactions of other nations. If everything had to be exchanged into the dollar, it was easier then to track other nations and their purchasing, and it's helped us in national security. Joe Biden, however, has a terrible relationship with the Saudis. Remember, he made the killing of Amal Khashoggi as one of his big things. Hated Mohammed bin Salman, the de facto leader of Saudi Arabia. Called him a sociopath, among other things. Didn't want to go to Saudi Arabia, and then oil prices got so high he had to go groveling, and it didn't do any good. The Saudis have decided not to renew. The deal was up. They didn't even want to renegotiate. So 50 years after agreeing to do all transactions in the American dollar, they're now going to do transactions however they see fit, including in the Chinese currency, which is going to make it harder for us at a national security level to track things, but also potentially drive up over time our transaction costs on the world stage, thanks to Joe Biden and his treatment of the Saudis, thinking that they were nothing and we didn't need them and good riddance and we were going to get rid of oil. Well, we're not. Y'all do understand that we're never actually going to get rid of oil, right? You wear those fancy new golf performance outfits. A lot of them are polyester, and that requires oil. Tires require petroleum. Planes are still going to require aviation fuel. We're not getting rid of oil, despite what the left claimed. We're not doing it. In our lifetime, we will not get rid of it. And yet Joe Biden wanted to get rid of our ties with Saudi Arabia. Well, now they're willing to get rid of ours. Concurrent to all that, one of the very first things Joe Biden did when he got in office was take the Houthi off the terror list. Donald Trump had put him on the terror list, and this again goes back to Saudi Arabia. The Houthi are an Iranian-funded militia in Yemen. Yemen, there was a civil war. There was a South Yemen and a North Yemen. The communists controlled, I think, South Yemen. The countries merged into just Yemen. When the communists, after the Soviet Union fell, they couldn't prop up all these little communist regimes around the world. They collapsed. They united the country. The Houthi grew out of a cult of person, like a legit cult of personality, tied to a particularly charismatic leader. Rallied certain tribes. They're the Houthi. They started a civil war. They control large portions of the country, and they're funded by Iran, and they attack the Saudis because they're funded by Iran. So Iran are the Shiites. The Saudis rule the Sunni world. They have Mecca and Medina. Medina, where Muhammad is from. Mecca, where you have the only Muslims are allowed to go worship. It's the holiest place in Islam. And it's a religious rivalry in addition to a geopolitical rivalry between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And the Iranians have funded the Houthi, who have launched terror attacks in Saudi Arabia, including trying to blow up oil refineries and oil depositories in Saudi Arabia. And yet Joe Biden, because he hates the Saudis, took the Houthi off the list. And now the Wall Street Journal has a pretty amazing story about what the Houthi are doing. It was just about 9 p.m. when radar operators aboard the U.S. Navy destroyer in the Red Sea, the USS Laboon, spotted a tiny arrow on their screens, a missile hurtling toward them at 5 times the speed of sound. The crew of the warship, with 300 sailors aboard, had just seconds to shoot it down. As the projectile closed in, the ship launched an interceptor from silos beneath its deck, destroying the incoming missile in flight. The January 9th attack came amid one of the largest maritime battles the U.S. has faced since World War II. Houthi rebels in Yemen that day launched 18 drones and cruise missiles, along with the ballistic missile, at the Laboon and 3 other American destroyers, a U.S. aircraft carrier, and a British warship, in an attack that unfolded over dozens of hours. A dozen hours. Since Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, Iran-backed Houthi rebels have lobbed missiles, drones, and other weapons at commercial ships and warships nearly every day. Although most of the weapons are shot down, at least 77 cargo ships have been hit, and one British-owned ship carrying 20,000 tons of fertilizer aboard was sunk. Though largely ineffective, the Houthi attacks have been able to disrupt shipping and keep the U.S. and allies tied down, frustrating the Navy's decade-old mission of keeping open the region's critical sea lanes. The attacks are the direct result of fateful geography. To travel through the Red Sea and reach the Suez Canal, one of the world's most heavily traveled shipping routes, cargo ships must pass through the Bab al-Mandab Strait, skirting the coast of Yemen within range of the Houthi arsenal. No warships have been known to have been hit in the 80 attempted attacks, but there have been close calls. The Biden administration has limited its military response to the Houthi attacks, hoping to avoid being drawn into a wider Middle Eastern conflict. But that has meant the flotilla of U.S. and allied warships has spent weeks and even months patrolling the Red Sea on alert. And attacks have kept coming. We're already in the war. Joe Biden just doesn't want to believe it. And while all of that is happening, in a serene town on South America's Pacific coast, China is building a megaport that could challenge U.S. influence in this resource-rich region that Washington has long considered its backyard. The Chancay deepwater port, rising here among pelicans and fishermen and small wooden boats, is important enough to Beijing that Chinese leader Xi Jinping is expected to inaugurate it at the end of the year in his first trip to the continent since COVID. Majority owned by the giant China Ocean shipping group known as COSCO, it's not the American big box store, different one. Chancay promises to speed trade between Asia and South America, benefiting customers as far away as Brazil with shorter sailing times across the Pacific for everything from blueberries to copper. As nations around the world shudder at a new flood of cheap Chinese manufactured goods, the port could open markets for its electric vehicles and exports. China has now become the top trading partner for most of South America. Thanks, Joe Biden. Thanks. In Asia, the New York Times reports that the United States is now on a defensive footing, becoming a humbler superpower. We've cut back so much since Obama was president that we're now considered teammates with shared responsibilities and not just the head ally who dictates the terms. Oh, and guess what? We're losing in Africa as well. This is from Bloomberg. Africa, with 60% of the arable land on the planet, 30% of the mineral reserves, and a population reaching 1.5 billion people, is an increasingly vital region for global security. Unfortunately, the United States has not been adapting to a rapidly changing scene. In the latest blow, U.S. troops have been forced out of Niger, where the Pentagon enjoyed a long-standing security partnership. At the same time, Russia and China are consolidating political and military influence across the continent. Russian paramilitaries and mercenaries using the model of the now-defunct Wagner Group have been operating in Mali, Congo, the Central African Republic, and other states. Autocratic leaders are hoping for economic benefits from Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative and to purchase AI-enhanced versions of the equipment that has made China a surveillance state. U.S. Africa Command warns that China is active in all the continent's 54 countries. Mike Langley, the general and commander of U.S. Africa Command, says Beijing aspires to establish naval bases on the Atlantic and Indian Oceans and the Gulf of Aden, and it's already built its first base on the Horn of Africa and Djibouti. We're falling behind everywhere, and it's a choice. That's the most infuriating thing. It's a choice. The leadership of Barack Obama and Joe Biden, they are surrounded by people who made a conscious decision that America as just one of 198 countries would be better than America as leader of the Western world. And many people decided they agreed because they're isolationists and think we should just stay home. And the Russians and the Chinese are surrounding us. The Chinese are involved in an espionage campaign in China. They have bribed enough Canadian parliamentarians that the Canadian Parliament is warning there are traitors among us. They're flooding Mexico with drugs that are running into our country. I can see it happening. You can see it happening. And yet Joe Biden's asleep at the switch. It's an absolute failure. Absolute. Back to the phones. Dayton, Ohio. Clinton, you're going to be up next. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Good afternoon, Eric. How are you?
Great.
I have to applaud you and thank you for what you said about American work ethic earlier. I mean, I was literally sitting in my car a little bit ago, and when you said that about the work ethic, and I was cheering. I was cheering so loud I actually woke my 6-month-old daughter.
Sorry to your 6-month-old.
I see it every day. I see, I work in skilled trades. And I've had friends. You had some friends. My wife and I had friends over the other night, and I got a phone call from a coworker who works a different shift at work. Went outside, answered the phone call, answered his question, came back in, and one of her friends looked at me and asked, "Is like, well, do you get paid for that phone call?" And I'm like, "No, he had a question." And I was like, "Well, I don't answer the phone unless I get paid." I'm like, well, sometimes you're not always going to get paid for being successful. Sometimes being successful is sharpening your skills, right? I took 6 weeks off paternity leave, when my daughter was born, and we got some new equipment in, and I sat there on the couch when I was holding her and feeding her, reading through these manuals, learning how to work this equipment so I wouldn't be behind, so I would be successful. It's all about work ethic, all about bettering yourself, and sometimes bettering yourself is you're not going to be compensated for bettering yourself. You'll be compensated in the long run, but in the short run, you're not going to be compensated. I mean, I'm 36 years old. I've been in skilled trades I've been in my career field for 16 years now. And it's a philosophy that, that has served me very, very well. I mean, I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I feel that I am very successful in my field because of this work ethic that, I've developed for myself. And it's a work ethic that I'm developing and trying to develop in my 4 children.
Yeah, so I'm so glad you say that. So I'll admit, I feel a little guilty right now because I have taken more vacation days this year than I've ever taken before. But it's because my daughter was graduating from high school, and with her going off to college, we had a couple of vacations we wanted to take while my wife was well enough to take, and she was still home. And so I feel guilty that I haven't been at work, but it's tempered with the fact that I got some quality time with my family that we otherwise wouldn't have had.
To live at work. It's not about
I know.
living at work. Work should not consume your life, no, but sometimes,
right. But sometimes it's got to.
You have to go the extra mile.
Yes,
it is what
exactly.
It is.
And people there are not enough people who appreciate that. And yet you're probably, when layoffs come, they're going to say, well, we can't afford to lose this guy, as opposed to the person who says, well, unless I clock in, I'm not answering the phone. That guy's expendable.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. 100%, Eric.
Listen, I appreciate the call. I got to let you go there because I got out of here. And it's relevant because a buddy of mine just texted me, literally just texted me, and said, I'm not going to name the bank, but my bank just closed my personal account, and I got $1 million. in multiple accounts with this bank. That's not going to happen if you use Old Glory. Old Glory Bank is a great bank, and you'll never have to worry about them canceling your bank account because you've done business. This is a conservative friend of mine who's at a very prominent bank, and they've just closed his account. He's got multiple accounts with over $1 million. And I told him, go to Old Glory. This isn't going to happen. This is why I'm a bank customer of Old Glory and have been for over a year. You can be a customer of theirs as well. OldGloryBank.com. OldGloryBank.com. You can get an account in less than 8 minutes online. OldGloryBank.com. You're not going to be canceled. They have no fee checking, no fee savings. You can do mortgages with them, loans. They've got great online bill pay and budgeting tools, and their app is incredible. You can even deposit cash at 88,000 retail locations around the country. OldGloryBank.com. It is and hopefully it's going to be my buddy Paul's bank too. They are a great banking institution. OldGloryBank.com. Member FDIC. Equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. Hello there. Welcome. I'll spend some more time on this tomorrow, I suppose, because we got Father's Day coming up this weekend. But there's new data out. According to a new Institute for Family Studies report, young men who grew up in an intact family with their married father are almost twice as likely to graduate from college as they are to land in prison. By contrast, young men from homes headed by a single mother, single father, step family, or adoptive parents are more likely to go to jail than graduate from college. What's so interesting is that this applies across races. Whether or not you have an intact family with a father active in the home is more predictive of whether you will go to college than your race, according to the study. That's powerful stuff. And it makes you feel guilty to some degree because, not every marriage works out and stuff. But it really is just something. Young men from homes headed by a single mother, single father, step family, or adopted parents are more likely to go to jail than graduate from college, while men with a married father in the house are twice as likely to graduate from college than go to prison. That is just crazy, wild data from the Institute for Family Studies that has just come out just in time for Father's Day. All right, we are out of time here today. When we're here tomorrow, Friday, it'll be an open line Friday. I'm still in Louisiana. I will take your phone calls, but also I want to kind of synthesize some of this global data that's out there about the failures of Joe Biden. Even as he's in Europe touting his leadership to the G7, they're not really taking him seriously anymore. He's abdicated our role in the world, and it's going to be a problem for all of us.